All right, in the last video, we made a login page and we made sure that it worked, okay? In this next video, we're gonna work on our teams, okay? So if we go back to our local host and hit refresh, we see that it's still up and running, okay? We come over to our actual Heroku app, hit refresh, it's still up and running, okay? It might take a second to load. Let's just double check that it's actually working. So it is running. So let's go ahead and we're going to get started by going into our app, and we are going to we're going to check our forms. Okay, so we come into forms and we do not have a form for teams. We want to actually make a form so we can add teams. Okay, so we always check our forms, our models, and our routes. Forms, models, routes, and then make sure we have an HTML page. Okay, so we go into our form, and I like to just copy the form that we've already done. So I'm going to copy that, paste it right here. We're going to call it the team form. Okay, so remember, Flask WTF is just a way for to use a library for forms. So we're going to call this the team form, like so. And here is going to be team name and team mascot, like so. And for the label, team name and team mascot, just like that. Okay, pretty easy. So the form is done. Okay, now we need to come into the models. Let's just check. Remember, we already did the model, so we have our ID, our name, our mascot, and we have this relationship. Okay, so our models is done. And now let's actually come in and just copy the login one. Okay, so we'll just right click, copy, and just paste it right into templates, like so. And we'll just call it, got to remember what you call it. I like teams because it's showing teams, right? So we'll call it teams plural and add that. So we have teams. And then we can go into routes. So we're going to do on routes, we'll just come right down here and we'll just say something like teams. And we're going to do add, edit, and delete all of them. Okay, so we'll have several different routes. So the first route we're going to do is the first view route, if you will. Okay, so in that route we start it with our decorator, right? So app.route, and it's going to be teams, like so. That will be what is showed, and we need to do our methods just like we did before, and it's going to be get and post. So those methods are kind of like when we have post, that means that there's a form on there. Okay, so now we're going to require login on this page. So we'll just call it login required, and that's coming up here from, let's make this bigger. Login required is a library inside the Flask login. So it's a method inside the Flask login. So when we come down here, that decorator is going to require this page to be logged in, or it will, if it's the person's not logged in, it's going to log them out, and that's what happens here. Okay, on logout user redirect to index. Oh, actually, that's not what happens there. We probably need to make sure that works. Oh, let's double check. I think we missed one here. That's interesting. So we need to redirect people when they're not logged in, send them back to the login page. So this is the little route that will do that. So this route redirects unauthorized users to the login page. So you got to have this here, and it's a decorator for login manager, which is at the top, unauthorized handler. So this is all straight out of the tutorials that I've looked at. Basically says, hey, all you need to do if they're not authorized, run them back to login. Okay, so make sure you add that on your route page. All right, back to teams. So in teams, we are going to first start with our form. So we're going to bring in our form, right? So let's bring in our form. So we go form is equal to team form. Now it's not going to show up. Why is it in red? because if you come up here, we never added it, right? So here's our forms. We need to add our team form. So team form, okay? So we come back down here, and we forgot our def. So def teams, like so. All right, we have our form. Okay. So if this is a request, so if request dot method, okay, is equal to post, okay, we're going to say we're going to get all the stuff out of the actual thing. So this request is also from Flask. So we need to say so this request comes up. We need to actually make sure we add that too. So request, okay. So if we're going to say if this is a request and the request is a post, meaning coming back from the form, okay, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to get the stuff out of the form. So let's say team name. We're going to create a variable called team name, and we're going to request dot form. So it's getting it out of the form. And what are we going to do? We're going to get it, okay, and it's called team name. It's the name of the object on the form. Do the same thing for team mascot. All right. So we set team mascot request dot form. Oh, not that one. Request dot form dot get, and this is team mascot. All right. So we have both of those. Now we need to run a query. We actually need to go and say, hey, we're going to add this to the database. Okay. So remember, this is the first one is add. Okay. So when the team loads, if they click this form, it's going to add. So this is going to be what happens on the add. So we're going to come down here and say add team. And I think it's add team, and I think it's also read team. So this is also what's going to happen. It's going to load the database also. So we'll read team also. Okay. So next, after we've got the two teams, we need to actually make a query. So we'll just say, let's create this variable called teams, and then we'll call team. And team is the object for the model, right? So that means at this point, you should be thinking SQL Alchemy. Okay. So we have the model. It's SQL Alchemy. We're calling that DB object. So teams. Okay. And what do we need to do? Well, we need to set team name. So we need to say, what is team name going to be, right? So in the database itself, there's two columns, team name. Well, there's three columns, team ID, team name, and team mascot. So we're going to send into teams, team name, and team mascot. Why not team ID? Is because it's auto incremented, right? So team name is going to be equal to team name. And notice how this team name is still not being used. It's grayed out, right? So we come down here and we say set that to that, and do the same thing for team mascot. Team mascot is equal to team mascot. So this team mascot is this variable, and this team name is this, and this team name is in the database column. Okay, in the model. This model here has that there. Okay. All right. So all we have to do is that, and then we just commit it, right? So db.session, okay, .add. And we're going to add teams, which is the query that we just did here, our add query, our insert query, okay? And then we're going to commit. So db.session.commit. So we committed it, like so. And then we're just going to say, after we're finished with that, send them back to teams. Send them back to here as a get. So then it will come all the way through as a post. It'll come all the way through. It'll do all this. And then once we send it back, it'll be a get. It'll come back and do the outer loop. So it's almost like an inside loop, outside loop. So we'll come in here and we'll say return, redirect, URL for teams. Okay, just like that. And this teams, again, remember, this teams is this teams here. So it says send it back up to teams. All right, now let's actually use the form. So what we want to do is to use the form, we have to send it in. So we're going to do something here that's going to go out and get all the teams. Okay, that's going to load the teams in a dictionary object. That's going to, in this dictionary object, it's going to send it into the HTML, right? So when we say return render template, okay, and we're going to call teams, which isn't actually been created yet. Actually, we did create it up there. So we're going to say render this template called teams.html. We're going to send into it the form. So form is equal to form. Okay, so we're going to send in the form here so we can use it on the actual template. And then we're also going to send in teams. Now, teams hasn't been created yet, right? So teams is a dictionary object that we're going to create that when we load, let's go back and see when we come and load it. Okay, once we load it, we want all the teams to show up. So we want a dictionary object that we can loop through that all the teams can show up. So let's just say we need to make one called teams. So we'll come right above here and we'll say teams is equal to get teams. And that needs to come out of the database. Okay, so we have two options here. We can just write another thing like this. Okay, just like this. And we could say use SQL Alchemy and create one. Or I want to show you how to do it actually with your own functions and stuff like that. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to create a new Python file, and I'm going to call it functions.py. You can call it whatever you want, but functions.py is perfectly fine for me. I kind of know what that means. Okay, so in functions.py, I want to do a couple things. First, well, I'm probably going to need one more too. So let's actually make another one, and we're going to call it dbconnect. So new Python file, dbconnect. I want to make a connection to the database, and I just want to say whenever I need it, I can do it. So dbconnect, and inside this dbconnect, we're going to import a brand new library called PyMySQL. So import PyMySQL, and again, it doesn't know what that is. So we need to go and import that, right? So I can come down here to the terminal. It seems to be running perfectly fine. So I'm going to stop it from running, and I'm going to say pip install PyMySQL. Okay. Let that do the install. It's going to go out and do a couple different things. Go out and grab it. And then I need to hit the up arrow a couple times and freeze and put that back inside there, because I need to freeze that and put it in my requirements document. All right, inside here, I'm just gonna have my DB connection, right? So here's my DB connection. All right, so it's define the connection. Okay, it's just whatever I wanted to call it. So define my connection, and the connection is gonna equal PyMySQL.connect, and the first one is host. And what is the host equal to? Okay. Then it's port and 3306. That's just the standard port on AWS. The database is equal to sys. Okay. The user is equal to admin. Okay, I remember that one. The password is equal to, and I think it was Pepsi2222, some junk like that. And then the last one is the cursor class. Cursor class is equal to PyMySQL.cursors.dict cursor. Okay, and what this does is it returns the result as a dictionary object. Okay, which I find to be a pretty easy way to bring the data in. All right, so at this point, I'm probably going to want to say return the connection. Just like that. So it's going to return the connection. Now I have an error here. I don't have my host. So I'm going to come out to my init file where I have that. And the host, remember the AWS host starts here with baseball and comes down here to com. Does not include the database at the end. So I come over here, my DB connect, single quote, paste that in right there. That's my connection. Okay. So in my functions, I want to actually have my connection. So I'm going to say from app import DB and app, just in case I want to use those. Okay. And then I could say from app.dbconnect import connect. So this app says go into the app folder here, find me dbconnect, and inside there import connect. And if we go back and look at it, this is connect. So it imported this connect. Okay. So we can use that connect. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say def, and we called it get teams. Okay. And in our get teams, we're going to first create a connection. So we just say connection equals connect. And that's going to make that connection. Okay. And remember, inside that connection, there was a cursor. So we could say with con.cursor as cur. So we're going to give it like a little alias. Okay. And then we want to make our SQL statement. So I just say SQL is equal to, and I use F here a lot. So I'll say make an F string. That way I can just put variables in. So if I want to say like bring in team ID, let's just say that my thing has a team ID. Inside my SQL statement, I could be like select all from teams, and then I could be like where team ID is equal to, and then just write like that, team ID. And it will actually make a dynamic, more dynamic SQL statement. Okay, so I'm bringing in team ID from, say, over here in routes. I could be like right here, team ID, which it doesn't know what it is. So I didn't ever declare it anywhere up there. So let's go back to functions. We're not going to do the team ID. We just basically say we want all the teams, right? So, and I'm not sure I want to actually say select all. I might want to say select team ID, team name, and team mascot. Now, as these get more complex, what you could do is just copy that SQL code, go right into your workbench, go into, ours is called baseball. Okay. Once you're in here, just run it, right? So just put that in there and click it, and you'll see that there's an error. It says teams doesn't exist. It's not called teams, it's called team, right? So you come in here, you run it, and it shows exactly what we want to say. We see all the columns. Remember, it's kind of what we want to do is return a dictionary object, which is essentially columns and rows. We want to make sure we know the names. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to copy that code, come back to my PyCharm, and I'm going to paste it in right here. That's my SQL statement. Okay. I always double check my SQL statement works. Okay. All right. So I have my SQL statement. Now I just need to run it. So cursor dot execute, and I'm just going to run that SQL just like that. Okay. And then I'm going to return the results. So return cursor, and there's two things you can return. You can either return fetch all, or you can return fetch one. Fetch one is going to return one thing, and that becomes a kind of a different kind of object. Fetch all returns a bunch of rows. Okay. So that's essentially it right there. Okay. Yeah, that's it right there. So let's go back, and we don't have a team ID here, so let's make sure we get rid of that. All right, so no team ID. So this, we just created that. If we come back into our routes, notice it's still red. Okay, so you got to go up to the top, and you just got to say, hey, make sure we include that. So from app.functions, import star. Now that's going to just say import star is going to be like anything that's inside that file, import it. Okay, I could say import get teams, import get practices later. It's going to get long and long and long, and I'm okay with it being longer for like these user models, so I can see which ones I have, or these forms, and you can put them on a second row, like right here. I could be like, oh, let's put that on a second row, and it will just automatically. It's the same thing. Notice it puts this backslash here automatically, so we'll get rid of that, like so. Okay, let's keep going. So we have our team, we're passing in the form. Let's see if we can get it to work. So let's open up Teams. And inside that, remember this used to be the login one, so we want to actually probably get rid of a lot of the login stuff. So we want to leave this flash message here, but we are going to come up here and say, instead of user management, we're going to say Teams. Okay, so let's call it team management. Okay, and let us come down the Flask message. All this is perfectly fine. And then we have our form, right? The form isn't username and password. The form is team name. Okay, so that's the label for the team name. And this is the password. And we don't actually have, we're not going to put admin there. Okay, and then the same thing down here. It's going to be team mascot. So it says go get the label for the mascot off that form. It's not Pepsi. Okay. And then down here is also going to be password. Okay. And then form submit. So if right now we run it, it's not going to do anything because we don't actually. So let's actually do Flask run and see what shows up. So we can so come down here, Flask run, and we can go back out to our internet and refresh. Okay, and let's log in. So we can go to that page, admin and Pepsi. Okay, so we log in. Okay, we come over here to Teams and nothing happens. Okay, why does nothing happen? Because we never actually said go into base. So we got to go into our base. And we just have to call Teams. So when we come down here under Teams, we just need to say go to base, right? And it's this URL fork. So we'll come up here, we'll copy this one, and it's whatever's inside the quotes, right? So we come down here in this href. If you know HTML, href is like the link, right? And we called it Teams with an S. Okay. Remember, this Teams is what's here. That's that Teams. Okay, so let's go out and see if this actually works. Okay, and we should be able to load the form, and nothing should happen. Okay, because we haven't actually used this here, and we don't actually have this showing up yet. Okay, let's go look. So in Teams, actually, I think it will show up. Okay, so let's go. It should be there because the login form was there. So I'm going to refresh. I'm going to go up to schedule and click Teams. And there it is, team name, team mascot. But what we want is we don't want this to show up like this. We want this to show up as a table with all the teams and then as an add button. We don't want to just like load this all the time. We want this to be what's called a modal. Okay, so when you click the button, a little pop-up shows up, you add the team, and then it goes back to showing the rest of all the teams. So let's do that. So we go into back to our PyCharm, okay? And this is fine. We need to actually go into our Teams HTML, okay? So we come down here and we're looking at our form. So let's go into, and we're gonna add H1 tag. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add a space, right? So BR is a break, and then I'm going to add a H1 tag. So the H1 tag is going to say Teams, and at the end of Teams, I want to add a button. So button, and the type is going to be a button. Okay, so button, and the class. Okay, this is all Bootstrap, right? So the class is BTN. And then it's BTN success and BTN large, make it a large button, and BTN block. Okay. And then we're going to make it a modal, right? And this is, again, this modal part is all part of Bootstrap, right? So we're going to say data.bs toggle, this one, and it's going to be modal. Okay. And then data.bs target is going to be pound add team. Okay. All right. At this point, I think we are just about finished with our button. And inside our button, what do we want to say is add team. Okay. So now if we go look, we should have an H1 with a button. Okay. And because Flask is still running, I can just click on here and just say like so. And we're going to have our H1 with an add team. If I click add team, nothing's going to happen. I didn't actually make the modal. I just made a button that calls the modal. Okay. Remember, modal is just another word for pop-up. So I'm going to come down and we're going to actually make a modal. And I could put the modal anywhere on this page. So I prefer to put it right here so I can see what's going on. So I'm going to do another BR. And remember, this modal doesn't show up unless it's called, right? So I'm going to go out to Bootstrap. I'm going to copy a bunch of code right off their modal page. Okay. So I'm going to come and just say all the way down to modal body, go out to Bootstrap. I'm just going to copy it. So this is just class modal fade. This ID is the same ID that you called here without the pound sign, because this is the target. This little pound sign means ID. Okay. So ID is equal to add team. Okay. All the other stuff is perfectly fine. The div class is modal, contents modal, headers modal. Down here under H5 class, that's kind of the header. That says add team. And then if you come down, there's a close button. Okay. And then the URL for this is the actual form action. Okay. So in the form action, you're going to actually call teams. So when it posts itself, This time when you click the button, what is it going to do? It's going to come down here and do that. And then as part of the body, we're going to move. So instead of this form here, which we had for the WTF form, we're not going to do that. We're not going to use that. Instead, we're going to use this one. Okay. And now we're going to put in these forms here. I'm just going to cut that, paste that in there. And then I'm going to cut the team here. So let's just cut that. Come down here, paste that in, and let's kind of make that lined up a little bit better. So let's come back here, like so. All right, just like that. That's good. So I can actually come and probably copy that and paste that. Man, this is not pasting very well. All right, just like that. So we have our label. This is inside the modal, and then we have our form submit. Okay. So let's grab our last little one here, and we'll paste that in here. And again, fix that little bit of, and I can put all of that on one row because it's kind of small. Makes it easy. Okay. All right. Now we want to finish up with a footer, and we want a cancel button for our footer. So let's finish this div. So we have this div here for the modal. So let's finish our div. Okay, like so. And then let's make one more div. So we'll go div, and we'll inside the div, the class will be modal footer. Again, that's all Bootstrap. So modal footer. Okay. Make sure we spell it right. That's funny. And let's put a button in there. So we'll just do another button, and this button will be the cancel button. So type is button, and class is btn secondary. That's going to be what the cancel button looks like. And then data bs dismiss. We're going to dismiss the modal, and then it's cancel, like so. We have our closed div tag, and then we just need to have a closed form tag. Okay, so we've closed our form, we've opened our form, and then we need to like close up some more divs. So let's close that div, and we'll close another div, and we'll close another div. Okay, and that should be just about it. Let's go and see if that works. Okay, so we still have it running. We just click down here and refresh. The form disappeared, and now if we click add team, our form opens up. This sign in, we could put it down here if we want, but this sign in is right there. Okay, so notice it says sign in, right? Where's that sign in coming from? That sign in is coming from the form, right? Because that's what we called it. So let's go and look, and form submit here, we call it sign in. So if we go back to our forms here under submit, we called it sign in. So what we should do is call it add team. Okay, and now let's go back, and if we hit refresh, add team, it says add team now. Okay, so we have our add team. Now let's load up all of the teams when the page loads. Okay, so let's create a table. So we're going to come back, and underneath, back in our teams, right below our last div here, let's create a table. So we'll go table, and we'll actually use our Bootstrap table class. So we'll go table, and table head, and table header, scope, column, and let's just do this one as team name. So we'll go team name, and I like to copy that and paste it to do a second one. I'm gonna put that like that, and this next one's going to be called team mascot, and this is just the header. All right, now in our first row, so we're going to have a row tr. Okay, and inside the row, we're going to have our two items. So it'll be td align left, and we want to use So we're going to do that. We're going to have 2 of those. Okay. And I think we're going to actually have more than 2. I think we're going to have delete and update also. So we'll probably have 4 of those. So let's paste that 2 more times. Okay. So we're going to repeat this a whole bunch of times. And how do we repeat in Python? We repeat by doing a loop, right? So let's loop this whole row, right? So we'll come here and we'll say, for the loop, we'll say for. So we'll use our little Jenga code, right? So Jenga, and it's a for loop. So for, and what are we going to loop through? We're going to loop through teams. That's what we brought in, right? So we brought in teams from the other page, right? So where did it come from? It's coming from right here. So teams. We're sending in this dictionary object full of a whole bunch of cool stuff in teams. So we're going to loop through it. So we're going to for team, so teams. So for team in teams. Now we can use team. So each team now it's inside one row of that dictionary object. Okay. So now we can come down here and say Jenga team dot team name. Jenga. All right. Just like that. And we could do it again with team mascot. So this says what column is it, right? Mascot for that team name. We could also do it again for team ID, and that's what we're going to need, right? So we'll need this team ID if we're going to pass stuff back and forth. So we have this for loop. What do we have to finish it with? We have to end it, right? So let's close that. So come over here, and I think it's just end for, one word, like so. All right. So we have our for loop, loops through, and it's done. So let's see what this looks like, okay? And I think we're going to put a button here. So, and we'll put another button here for these, for a couple more modals that we're going to build. All right, so let us run it and see what it looks like. So it's already running. We'll come back in here. We'll run it. And we've got our little thing. So we have our team name. This is coming right out of the database, right out of teams, just like so. Now, let's say I wanted to make this alphabetical. Okay, let's say I added some more teams. And actually, let's see if we can add a team. So we're going to come in here. Let's add a team. And let's just call it, the team name is Atlanta. And the mascot is the Braves. And it's password. It's a password field. And we need to fix that, right? Because that's kind of weird. So we want this alphabetical. All you have to do to make it alphabetical is change the SQL statement. So I can come over here and I can go right into my functions and say, select from team, order by team name. Okay, just like that. Change that one little change, come back over here, refresh, and Atlanta should be first. Okay, so we just changed the SQL statement. All right. Let's go change that form so that it's not password anymore. So I can come in here, I can go into the forms, and I don't want this one to be a password field. I want it to be a string field. So I'm just going to say string field. And I don't know if I need validators here or even here. Okay, actually, I think data is required. Let's leave the team name should be it should be required. The mascot, yeah, let's make sure the mascot's required too. That's kind of cool. Okay, so we'll just leave that be. So if we come back over here and refresh, add the team, it's not a password field anymore. Okay. All right, let's move to. We want to be able to have a button here that says update the team and another button here that says delete the team. So if we want to update and delete. So we'll add those 2 routes. Okay. So let's go into back into our here, and we'll go into teams, and we're going to do a little bit more stuff here. This one's going to be update and this one's going to be delete, and we need a modal for it. But we also need to make those routes. Okay. So I guess we should probably make the routes first. So let's go look at our routes and go into update. Now the update is pretty easy. So if we go into routes, here's our teams. Let's just make another one. So app.route, and it's going to be team update, singular team update. Okay. And we're going to actually have to pass in the team ID. So to pass in Flask, you just do a little, like these little carrots, and you just say, what are you passing in? Team ID, like so. Okay. And then we got our methods. It's going to come in through a form. So we got to actually do our little get and post. Like so. And there is a login required for this. I don't think we need to worry about that because what's going to happen is it's going to go through this route and it's just going to do everything and then go right back to Teams. So I don't know if you absolutely need to have login required here. So we're going to call this one team update. Okay, just like this. And because we're passing in team ID, just like any other function in Python, we need team ID here. And it should be pretty close to being the same. So now we can use team ID inside our function. So the first thing we want to do is query the team and get all the information for that team, right? So we're going to use the SQL alchemy. We're going to say team is equal to team.query.get, okay? And we're going to pass in team ID. So it's going to basically go out and say, hey, get me the team ID, give me the whole team with this team ID, okay? And put it into this little object here called team. And then we're going to say team.teamName, okay, is equal to whatever's inside that form. So request.form.get, and it's team name. All right. Do the same thing for the next one. So I'm going to copy that, and we're just going to say team mascot. It's going to grab team mascot. All right. So we got our query. We kind of updated the stuff that's inside team with whatever's inside the form. And then we just need to commit it. That easy. So db.session.commit. Just like that. And then we want to say, hey, it's been committed. So we use our Flash. That's our messaging system, right? And we say, here we could say team.teamName, okay, has been updated, something like that. And then let's just return it. So return redirect URL for, and we're going to send it where? Back to Teams. Okay, back up to here. It'll reload it. Okay, so let's see if that works, right? So let's go back to teams.html and let's add our update right here. Okay, so go into Teams and we need to put a button. So instead of this, let's have a button. So we're going to start it with a button. So button, okay, type equals button, okay, and then we have all the stuff that we did up here, okay, for our button up here. So in fact, let's just copy this button. It makes it kind of easy. So we'll just copy that button and just paste it right here. That's our button. Now let's go through it. So it's going to be a green button. I think I like it green, okay. It is a modal, but instead of BS target being add team, it needs to be update team. So we'll just say update team. And the problem is you can't have this target have the same name over and over and over again. And if you look at our actual thing, we're going to have 3 buttons here, and every single one's going to have the same name. So what is different amongst each of these is this ID. So if we just say bring up the modal for this one, okay. So let's do that. Let's just add at the end of this some Jenga code which puts this on the end of each one, okay. But we'll, instead of team mascot, it'll be team ID, and that way each modal will have a different target, so it'll know which one it's looking for. I'm going to get rid of some of this white space just to make it look a little bit cleaner. And it's not add team, it's going to be update. We'll just like that, update, okay. So we can come back here, and we won't actually make the modal. Let's just see what this looks like. So we'll come back over here, and we'll run it, and we now have update buttons, okay? And if we right-click and go in and look at our page source, in our little modal, if you come down here and look for this one says add team. This is our update team here. Notice it says update with a 3 on the end, a 1 on the end, and a 2 on the end. Just like that. And that's what we need. That's what we need it to look like. All right. So let's go back. And I don't like that being so big. So let's get rid of button large. Okay. And let's go back and see how that changed things. So if we hit refresh, kind of made it a smaller button. I like that. Much smaller. Okay. So now we can update the team. If I click it, nothing happens. We actually haven't made the modal for it. We just made the button for the modal. Okay, so this one is going to be a little bit different of a modal because we have to actually pass some stuff in. So I'm going to come down, and here I'm going to put the modal right here. So I'm going to come over here to button. I'm going to put the modal right below it. And again, I'm just going to copy the stuff and then explain what each part of it does. Okay, hopefully you'll go through it and try to understand a little bit about what each part does. So here's just the modal. Okay, just like up here, this is the little thing that's going to pop up, right? First part of it is the update modal. This has to match this. Notice I called this update team, this right here, update modal. I'm going to change this to modal. They need to match. Okay, so update modal with the team ID, update modal label. Okay, this other stuff is just kind of developing the modal. Okay, and then you get down to the actual form here. Okay, in the form, when you do a URL for, okay, that's calling the actual thing, to pass in the ID. It's what are you going to call it? Okay, so the variable you're passing back is called team ID. And then it's what it is you're going to do. So here we're going to pass back that team ID. So team is like, team says go to that dictionary object and get whatever's inside the team ID column. Okay, so we're going to pass back as team ID, go to the dictionary object and get whatever's inside that column. And then inside the modal body itself, this is how I like to do it. I don't like to call those WTF forms objects here. I like to build my own little form out. So we have our first one. We just make a little label for it. We have our input. The input type is text. ID is team name. That team name matches up here, here, and here. And then where it says value, we're just bringing in the value to preload that box with the team name already. So team.teamName. Again, I'm using this team to load the box. Okay, so team name, team mascot. And then down in the footer, I just have the submit button. Okay, so in that footer, I have two buttons of a submit and a cancel. This submit calls this form here. So you click submit, it's within the same form tag, it's going to do the action for it, and it's going to call that team update and pass back team ID. Okay, so update should work now. Let's go test it. So we come back, we refresh, still working, there's no big errors, and let's just say, let's add another team. We'll call it test, and the mascot for test is a pencil. That's kind of cool. Click add team, and you know what? It wasn't just a regular test, it was a hard test. So let's say hard test, click submit, and now we have hard test. But what happened to our message? Our message is like an angry message, right? It should be a green message, not a red message. So we should probably work on that. All right, and that would be what happens with Flash, right? So if we go back to our routes and look at our message here, we do not need to send an angry message. We need to send a good message, right? So let's go back to our routes and see how to send I think we're good for right now. We'll work on that in another video. This video is already getting pretty long. So the last thing we want to do is a team update or a team delete, right? So let's do that really quick. I will actually just copy some code to make it go a little bit faster. In our delete itself, we are going to do a very similar thing. We are going to call it team delete, and we're going to pass in the ID. So we'll know which one to delete. Login is required, get in most methods, and team delete. Now, we got to query this thing, right? So db.session.query, and it's a little bit long. We're going to query team, which is the object, right? So let's go out and get teams, but we're going to filter by team .team ID, okay, where it is equal to, so it's compared to team ID, which we have right here. So whatever's been passed in. So go out to team, make sure we filter by this team object, okay, and we're going to delete it like so, okay. But in order for us to delete it, we need to actually synchronize the session. So this next part is required for the team part. Okay, so when you delete team, but you want it to actually work and delete all the practices for that team, you need to add this little bit of code. So it's synchronize session, like so, equals fetch, just like that. And that took me a lot of troubleshooting to try to figure that out, like to make sure, how do we get it to actually work, okay, for the cascade delete. So we got to commit that, session.commit, and then we can send that message out, flash. I'm just going to copy this, and I'm actually going to copy both of these lines here and just paste it right here. And I'm just going to say, I'm not going to say team.team. I didn't actually go out and grab a team variable. Notice that there's no variable that this went into. This just goes out, grabs it, fetches it, and deletes it. Okay, so right here, I'm just going to say the team has been deleted. I keep it simple. All right, so we redirect back to teams. So let's see if this works. Actually, we don't actually have a button for it. So let's go to our routes and let's create this. Actually, this part is actually pretty easy. So I'm going to come back. I think I'm going to delete this this TD here and just put the button inside the same one as the other one, right? So I want to just add that button. I think I'm just going to keep them next to each other, so the buttons kind of line up right next to each other. All right, so I'm going to need a delete button. So I'm going to come in and copy one of the old buttons, and I'm just going to paste in a delete button. So this time I use button danger, and it's delete the modal, and again team ID. Okay, so make sure you have the pound sign. All right, and then I'm going to copy and paste some of the delete modal. This is a much easier delete modal than the others because it just basically says, are you sure you want to delete it? So come in here, paste it in, and let's just talk about this again. Delete modal, this has to be the same as this button here, has to be the same thing that we're going to call. So when we call it, let me paste that down here. When we call this ID, needs to be the same as this here. Okay, that's kind of big, and we want to delete the team, not the practice. So we'll just say delete team. And are you sure you want to delete team name? This can't be undone. And then we're actually going to call at the very bottom. We have a little so we have our little button for on cancel. And then if they're going to delete, we have another thing. So we're just going to make a form around that. So we have all the information up here, but then our form is at the very bottom. And in our form, we basically say, hey, if you click this button, it's going to delete. We call our delete and we pass in the team and team ID just like we did before. So team ID is equal to team. Go get the dictionary object and find the column for team ID for this one. Pass that back to team delete and it'll delete. Okay. So this should be working. So if I go back to my code and refresh, I should get a delete button. Okay. And if I delete this hard test, I'm going to get, are you sure you want to delete hard test? I click delete. It passes that back in and the team has been deleted. All right, so this has been a long video, and hopefully it has helped.